Hmm. Okay, I think we are ready to roll. So welcome everybody, and thank you for tuning in. I'm going to actually begin tonight, tomorrow, wherever we are, with the prayer for the soldiers, because I think last week I may have been in a rush and didn't do it. So I want to make sure I don't forget. So I'm going to start with the Mishaber for Tzahal. Mishaber Chabotenu Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov, Hu Yivarech et Chaylei Tzva Haganah Yisrael, Ha'omdim al Mishmar Tzenu B'arei Eloheinu, Migvul HaLevanon V'ad Midmar Mitzrayim, Minayam HaGadol Ad Levo HaArava, V'Yabasha Ba'avir U'Bayam. ייתן אדוני את אויבינו הקמים עלינו ניגפים לפניהם, הקדוש ברוך הוא ישמור ויציל את חיילינו מכל צרה וצוקה ומכל נגע ומחלה, ישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם, ידבר שונאינו תחתיהם, ויעטרם בכתר ישועה ועטרת ניצחון, ויקוים בהם הכתוב כי אדוני אלוהיכם הולך עמכם להילחם לכם עם אויביכם, להושיע אתכם ונאמר אמן. Okay. Just a public service announcement. As you know, next Thursday is Tanit Esther, so we will not be meeting. When we come back on the 20th of March, I'll keep you posted. I will check with host Yossi, but we may be at a different time. I know 6:30 can be difficult for some people, but we will let you know by then what the new date will be. Okay, tonight's subject, I believe, is a very, very fascinating subject. I call it the mysterious Megillah. What is really going on in the Megillat Esther? Okay, yeah, sometimes I do an audible and change on the fly. I know we had some other titles, but I think this is something that I think is a fantastic exploration into what the Megillah is, the deeper idea of what is going on here. There is a quote, it comes from the Yerushalmi in Masechet Megillah that says the festival of Purim will never be abolished, even in the days of Moshiach, when there is some opinions that other holidays may be even though nothing in the Torah is supposed to change, but there's an opinion when Moshiach comes that certain holidays may be either changed or no longer applicable, etc. But Purim will always remain as it is. And this is a very fascinating idea because, first of all, we regard Purim not as a minor holiday, but it's certainly not a biblical holiday. And in a sense, we could question, why does this Chag is even allowed to be in the list of Jewish holidays? Not only is it in the list, but the rabbis elevated it. It certainly, of course, came after the Torah was given, so it can't be a Torah holiday, a biblical holiday, but it's been elevated. And how do we know that? Because the bracha that's said when we read the Megillah is Asher Kedishanu B'Tzotav B'Tzivanu Likrota Megillah. And that word B'Tzivanu, B'Mitzvotav, where was it commanded? Who commanded it? It certainly isn't in the Torah. So that's similar to the bracha on lighting Hanukkah candles that was also elevated to be a quasi-biblical holiday. But the truth is that Purim, unlike Hanukkah, has even less justification in being included in the list of Jewish holidays because the Gemara says explicitly that after we left Egypt and we came to our own land, the only time that we can designate a day as a national holiday is when it is connected to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel. And Purim doesn't take place in Israel. Purim takes place in Persia. So according to what the Gemara says, Purim should not even be allowed, should never have made the cut because it doesn't take place in Israel. Not only that, there are many occasions that we call a Purim Katan, a minor Purim, when things happened in different communities and they established a special commemoration day for that event. And you see these if you Google Purim Katan, the minor or small Purim, you find all kinds of celebrations and commemorations of events that took place. I'll just give you some example. There, I looked through, and once I think I wrote about 10 or 12 of these. Purim Ancona. It's a place in Italy. It was actually had 4 different communal Purims because all the times that this place was saved in the 17th and 18th centuries. There's a Purim Borgel that commemorates when the Jews of Tripoli they celebrate the ouster of this pasha who had conducted a reign of terror against them from 1793 to 1795. So when he was removed from power, they celebrated. There's a Purim Chevron. This is an interesting one. It's called the Window Purim. It's commemorated on the 1st of Av in Chevron. Because it's called Purim, the Window Purim, because the community was saved when a bag of money mysteriously appeared in a window, allowing them to pay off an extortion fee to the Pasha, the Ottoman Pasha. I would, if a large bag of money fell at my window, I probably would also establish a Purim Katan. And I'd invite you if that happens, so pray for it. There's a Purim in Rhodes, a Purim in Tiberia. These are all called Purim Katan, but they don't make the list of official Jewish holidays. So in localized places, it might be celebrated. So we kind of have to understand why Purim not only makes the grade, but it also is elevated to a very higher status. The backdrop of Purim, of course, it takes place during the period of time after the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, which was destroyed by Babylonia, and Babylonia is replaced by Persia. These empires rise and fall. When Babylonia falls, Persia takes over. Achashverosh, commonly identified as Xerxes. It's a good word because you can use the X twice, but you can't use it in Scrabble. So don't worry about that. There's only one X in Scrabble, but we call him Achashverosh. He's the ruler, and he has a strange dual attitude towards Jews. When the Megillah opens, it seems that the Jews of Persia, remember they are 3 generations along into the exile from Yerushalayim, from Jerusalem, and it seems that they have found a very comfy and cushy home, away from home, of course, in Persia, or in the capital. They live quite nicely. They're even honored guests of the king. And as we open the Megillah, we see this opening scene where they're invited to this 6-month-long, very orgiastic drinking and dancing extravaganza with pretty, speaking of Xerxes, pretty much X-rated. This might be a double X-rated, the events as the rabbis describe it. And the Jewish community has been invited. They're convinced that Shuras Shushan, they have really made it in Persia. They are now accepted. But at this very same bombastic banquet organized by Achashverosh, they watch aghast as Achashverosh appears dressed in the clothes of the Kohen Gadol, which the clothes were confiscated, of course. Babylonia conquers Israel, takes these items, including the clothes, and this fits in, of course, with this week's Parsha of Tetzaveh, which talks all about the clothes. So we're getting in a little reference to the Parsha as well. And Achashverosh dresses up in the clothes of the Kohen Gadol. This is something out of Raiders of the Lost Ark. You see there, they took this scene right out of the Megillat Esther, where you have this evil person dressing up in these clothes. And then he brings out the holy vessels of the Beit HaMikdash from which to drink and to eat, which is, of course, something very, very no pun intended, very distasteful to the Jewish crowd that's there. And that's why we use the tune, the mournful tune of Eicha, of Lamentations, when we come to this part in the Megillah, because it's very sad and distressing that he is, in a sense, mocking the holy articles of the Beit HaMikdash. So on the one hand, they're invited to this banquet. They can eat and drink to their fill, and they feel really accepted. And then he goes and does something which really shocks them and very much insults them. So what is going on here? What message is Achashverosh trying to convey by inviting them to the banquet and then doing something that is really very, very hurtful to them and cuts to the core? And what happens to make both Achashverosh and Haman decide that they're going to solve their Jewish question, so to speak, once and for all? So the answer to these questions go to the essence of what Megillat Esther is really all about. Like many rulers in history, Achashverosh is willing to tolerate the Jews, to even welcome them, because he knows how clever Jews can be, how good they are for the economy, for business, what excellent advisors they make because they're very wise. Mordechai joins the ranks of many other Jews throughout history that served in high positions in foreign countries. You can start with Yosef, of course, who almost takes over Egypt and saves Egypt and enriches Egypt. Then there's Abarbanel in Spain. There's Daniel, which has a whole book of the Tanakh devoted to him. And these are expert counsels to the royal court. Achashverosh is even willing to accommodate the special needs of the Jews to some extent. In fact, the rabbis say that these meals were glatt kosher, strictly kosher, and he's willing to let them practice their own customs because that represents no threat to him whatsoever. But one thing that he cannot abide by, he cannot permit us to fulfill our ultimate destiny of living in our own land, under our own sovereign rule, and eventually, most importantly, with our own restored Beit HaMikdash. By wearing the garments of the Kohen Gadol, he's sending a very, very caustic message to the Jewish citizens. He says, you Jews can practice your faith here in Shushan, in Persia, as a minority, but you are not going back to Jerusalem. You will not rebuild your Beit HaMikdash, and you will not re-establish the avodah, the service, once performed by the Kohen Gadol. That's done. That's over. Forget about it. You are confined to the diaspora. And he will tell Esther more than once when she approaches him and says she's going to ask for something. And he says his famous phrase, Ad chatzia malchut, yinaten lach, up to half of the kingdom, it shall be granted to you. And the commentators say, what do you mean up to half of the kingdom? Which half will he not grant? And they answer, the restoration of Jewish sovereignty and the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash, that alone is not up for discussion, because Achashverosh has inherited an empire from Cyrus, who had originally said to the Jews, you may now go back to rebuild your Beit HaMikdash. And that has come to a stop. Why was it stopped? Well, again, Achashverosh has now been kind of schooled into what to watch out for among the Jews. And he's been lectured in this by none other than his wife, Vashti. The Gemara, I would say, makes it quite clear via the story of Zeresh, Haman's wife, and later even by Esther, that the women behind the scenes essentially call the shots in the kingdom. And the men probably just think they do, but it's the women who are really basically running the show. Now, Vashti is an interesting character. She actually has royal blood. She was a granddaughter, some say great-granddaughter, of none other than Nebuchadnezzar, who destroyed the Beit HaMikdash, who was the head general and later uh, ruler of Babylonia. And she has royal blood, and certainly she is defending her grandfather or great-grandfather and saying, look, Grandpa destroyed the Beit HaMikdash. You better be sure that the Jews have no ideas of rebuilding it. And it's interesting because we're told that Achashverosh is a commoner. He has no royal blood. He marries Vashti because she does have this royal blood, and it allows her to act in a very uppity fashion. Basically, she says, hey, I'm the royalty here, not you. If you have any rights of ascension to the throne, it's because there's a requirement of royal blood, and I have it, but you don't. So she is quite uppity, and that actually is what gets her in a lot of trouble when she tells Achashverosh, I will not listen to you. In a sense, you should be listening to me. But in the beginning, Achashverosh is willing to tolerate the Jews despite this animosity which he has against us. It's kind of inbred, as long as we know our place and we don't cross a red line and we don't ask for too much, then he's pretty much willing to go along with us. So what changes his disposition? What turns him into a very not just agreeable but avid partner with Haman to commit genocide? This is real genocide. This isn't what the morons on the streets are screaming about. This is real genocide. What causes him to change his outlook? One word: Mordechai. Because Mordechai is different than the other people. He is a proud, uncompromisingly courageous Jew. He's a member of the Sanhedrin. He's an elite. And that is a major component of our national identity. So although he likes and respects the advice and the wisdom of Mordechai, he also knows that Mordechai is a force to be reckoned with and a problem, and also someone who is connected to the official kingdom of Israel. As a member of the Sanhedrin, that is one of the high-ranking offices in the hierarchy of the land of Israel. So he's a kind of walking, talking symbol of our nationhood and spiritual supremacy. When Achashverosh is confronted by Mordechai, who will have none of the diaspora mentality practiced by his co-religionists who go along with everything, this convinces Achashverosh that I'm going to partner up with Haman, and he seals the edict of our destruction. When Haman offers him a bribe, Achashverosh says, "You don't need to bribe me. I'm in this. I'm part of this whole deal." But of course, we know that Hashem hears our cry. He sees that we've come together, we pray together, we fast. He answers our prayers, and he reverses Achashverosh's mindset by convincing him that his own life is threatened by Haman, and that Haman is a direct rival to his throne who wants to usurp him. So this, of course, trumps, no pun intended, the desire to act against the Jews. He certainly doesn't want to lose his throne. And therefore, ultimately, Haman is executed, interestingly enough, ironically, after building the very gallows to hang Mordechai upon. And Achashverosh will also, ironically, become the very instrument for the Beit HaMikdash to be rebuilt through his and Esther's son, Darius II, who will renew the decree of Cyrus and allow the Beit HaMikdash to be rebuilt and restored. And that is what will happen shortly after this whole story. This is the crucial postscript that allows us to celebrate Purim at all, because even though we said events occurring, that only events which occur in Israel can become national celebrations, Purim is accepted because its ultimate purpose is the restoration of the temple and the regathering of the Jews to Israel. Now, the events of Purim are frighteningly close. I want to bring this home to what we are experiencing. Generally, with periodic purges, the nations of the world can tolerate us, even welcome us at times. But as soon as we flex our muscles and express our unique identity, And certainly when we reclaim our land and our sovereignty, then all the hate comes out. All the anti-Semitism that we see around the world is pure anti-Zionism, anti-Israelism, because the world cannot accept our being masters of our own destiny in our own land. And that is why, as we recently learned, the Palestinians rejected a deal that gave them 97% of the land that they asked for. And that is what the protests in universities and city streets everywhere are all about. Just as Haman tries to convince Achashverosh that we do not mix with other people, and he says this famous phrase, Yeshno am echad b'datehem shonot, there is a certain people, they have different laws, v'datei hamelech einam osim, and ultimately they don't listen to you, king, they have their own king, God. So Hamas, similar to Haman, and of course they're connected by being Amalek. Hamas tries to convince the world that we are not one of them in whatever country they're at. Just like Paro, by the way, said the same thing. He's also one of the prototypes that of anti-Semitism when he said, Am Yisrael Rav Atzum Mimenu, the nation of Israel has become great through us or from us, separating this community into us and them. We're the Egyptians, they're the interlopers, they're really not part of us. But it's all based on our struggle to be an Am Chavshi Ba'artzenu. That is what we are struggling to be wherever we are. We're our own nation. We're an independent entity. Paro was right about that. We are independent, and we want to be in our own land. That's what we're striving for throughout history. It goes as far back as the first Jew to Abraham. Remember, Abraham wants to buy a piece of land on which to bury Sarah in Eretz Israel. Of course, the Marat HaMachpelah and in Hebron, but they have this argument beneath the surface, what's going on as Abraham negotiates with Ephron of the Hittites. So they say, go ahead, take anything you want. You're a prince here, go ahead. But they use the language very subtly. B'mivchar kavarenu, kavor et metecha. Take the choicest of our land to bury your loved one, to bury Sarah. But Abraham understands, no. I don't want this to remain your land. This is going to be officially our land. As the first Jew, Hebrew, whatever you want to call him, he's setting the tone that says this needs to be under our sovereignty. So he pays a very high price in gold in order to ensure that this stays Jewish land forever. And that is why we are also paying a high price in blood to keep our land. It's very precious, and we have to pay a lot for it from people who want to deny it to us, whether they live in our area or whether they live in Toronto or Australia or wherever else, trying to fight against us because they know that this is the struggle, that once we become our own sovereign country, we will be one of, if not the premier empire or country in the world. We're already on everybody's headlines, but we will really feel our oats once we have our own land. And that's what they're fighting against. The bottom line is this. We may enjoy periods of prosperity and popularity all throughout the diaspora. We may get oodles of kosher noodles and the accoutrements of Yiddishkeit in countries around the globe. But the focal point of Jewish life must be to reestablish ourselves in our own land, operating under our own rule, fulfilling the Torah to its fullest. And when that becomes our collective mandate and our mission, then we have a fighting chance to restore the Sanhedrin, to bring the Moshiach, to usher in the Geula, and anything else is just a mask. So this is what I suggest to you the story of Purim and the Megillah is all about. Beneath the surface, it's a wonderfully celebratory, very upbeat holiday, and it should be that way. but there's a very deep and serious battle going on here, and that is to define who we are and what we are and where our ultimate future lies. It doesn't lie in Persia or in Shushan or in any diaspora locality. It belongs, it belongs where it belongs, right here, when Eretz Yisrael, Medinat Yisrael, belongs to us. And that's what the fight was about then, and that's what the fight is about now. And Bezrat Hashem, with God's help, we are going to, it's a very cruel and long and difficult fight, but we're going to win the fight because we are here to stay. And if the world ultimately comes to our side, and thank God we do have some good friends in the world. Cyrus was a good friend, and I believe the US president is doing some wonderful things for us. But regardless of that, wherever that goes, and it's unpredictable, we understand that we have to be headed in the right direction, and we have to establish ourselves and reestablish ourselves as a sovereign people in our own land. And that ultimately is the reason why Purim will always remain as hopefully a celebration of the return to Israel and the restoration of the Beit HaMikdash and the Jewish people in our own land. So may Hashem smile and Purim with favor upon us, and everybody should have a Freilich Purim Chag Purim Sameach. Shabbat Shalom as well, and Bezrat Hashem will be back, same place, but maybe a different time, 2 weeks from tonight. Shabbat Shalom, v'Chag Sameach.